My name is Donna. I'm a PSAC member for 33 years. I took my first union course, I believe it was probably about 1974. At that point in time, I was spending a lot of time at the union office. I enjoyed working with the regional rep at the union office and found it fulfilling that I was finding out lots of information about my rights as an employee. In about 1978-79, we always looked at the post office, of the contract negotiations with the post office. They always seemed to be out on strike, or they were always getting better benefits, and they seemed to have things that the federal employees didn't have. And working with the union rep, she had said, well, you know, they go on strike, they're very active, and they have their members behind them, and that that's why they have gained the things that they had. We were in contract negotiations. They were very aggressive with saying, well, now we probably are going to be going on strike to get, we want to, with unemployment insurance and with my situation, when they talked about the maternity leave, that was something that we had thought that was very important, that if we had to go out on strike to obtain some type of a maternity leave of some sort. We were just a little CR, and I thought, you know, I'm this timid little CR clerk, and this is kind of going overboard with all the structure that they have in place. But we all went, took our time after work, went for many, many nights for training and tried to understand what the structure was about. We didn't have many people that were active at that particular time because people were very hesitant about their job. We didn't have job security. We thought that if we went out on strike that we wouldn't have a job to go back to. And my job was very important to me. I had 2 small children, and I wanted to make sure that I preserved my job. So it was kind of like a balancing act of whether to be active and whether I was going to have a job or not. So it was a very, very scary situation. It turned out that I was appointed as area captain for the strike in 1980. And every night after, I was a designated employee at the time, and I felt a bit ambiguous because I couldn't walk the picket line. I had to report to work each day, and then I went after work to the Alliance office, and we had to strategize of what we were going to do the next day. It was very interesting to come together as a group of women. Some did not have, some were disabled, could not walk. Some did not have daycare. We had pregnant women. We had all types of women, all ages. We had older women, younger women. We weren't postal workers that were militant. We were just ordinary women, working women that were looking after our families. So we soon realized that we had to set up a way that all the members could receive a strike pay and receive their $25 a day, whether they could be on the picket line or whether they were able to do whatever possible. So we set up a system that some of them worked in the Alliance office to make sure that they were covered with paid sick leave. The strike captains were at on the picket line keeping the records and doing the things that were necessary. Every day we had to strategize some way that we could make our point in Saskatoon that we were on strike, and that we had the public support, because the nature of our jobs, especially for my job, was income support for people that have had no money, that were unemployed. All of our jobs were important, and if we were out on strike, that little pensioner or the person in agriculture or the person was on unemployment, or the veteran, all of these people would be affected by our being out on strike. So it was a very controversial time for us to be out on strike and also have the commitment to the people that we serve in Canada. So each day we had a strategy meeting, and each day we had to plan what we were going to do to have our strike be effective. We started out very slowly, just basically getting organized for striking each day. The strike was in about 1 week. We were in about 1 week's time, and there was no movement with the collective agreement. There was no movement with negotiations. There was no movement at all. So we, CEIU and the national office, decided that we were going to have what we called a Black Monday. On Black Monday, we decided that we had to have an impact across Canada to bring the news coverage and to promote negotiations. In Saskatoon, we decided that, first of all the designated employees were asked to put a financial donation towards the strike, put the money in a strike fund, so that all members that were on strike that would be covered, their wages would be covered fully, or at least compensated as much as possible. In addition to that, we decided that we needed to have the designated employees somehow participate in the strike action, so that they would not be penalized or fined for $1,000 a day for walking out on the job and being on the picket line. We asked all the designated employees to leave for lunch, go out for lunch on Black Monday. The office was empty, and all of the designated employees walked out of the office and went for lunch at 12 o'clock. We did not tell them anything other than we asked them to go for lunch. A group of we brought in all the picketers from all the areas of the city into the federal building on 22nd Street. And at approximately 12:30, when people were returning for lunch, about 12 strong women locked their arms in front of the federal building door and blocked the door from anyone entering. Our management had gone out, and all the departments in the federal building had gone for lunch, usually as they normally did that day. And so the front door was blockaded and no one could re-enter the building. Our manager came back from lunch, and his assistant was inside the building. And he didn't know what to do. And so the assistant inside, I can't remember what her position was, she pulled out the manual for in case of a disruption during a strike. That that the federal government has manuals on every possible situation that they have. She pulled out the manual and started yelling from the window of the reading the riot act to us, and that they were going to call the police and that we must disband and disbar. The CRs held fast, and people were pushing and shoving, and there were bruises, but those women held their arms locked and would not let anyone in the building. They phoned the police. The police said that they could not come to the site because it was a legal strike, and unless there was some kind of physical violence or whatever, that they would not get involved in that. We had the legal right to picket on the street. We were not on the premises, and we had followed the guidelines to a letter of the law, which we had discussed prior to our strike. Our manager at this point in time, after an hour and a half of being out on the street and all the employees on the street, decided that what he maybe should do. So he went across the street to the Holiday Inn and wanted to rent a room for 200 people. And the Holiday Inn basically said, "I'm sorry, you have a problem over there and you have to solve your own problem. We're not renting you a room for 200 people." So then, at this point in time, we realized that we had made our point, and so approximately about 2:30, 3 o'clock, the ladies, it was time for them. Their strike was the end of the day for them. It was time to go home. So they basically unlocked their arms and let people enter the building. After the incidents, the Black Monday, negotiations continued, and the word came down, I believe, on Wednesday that the government was negotiating in good faith, and that we would be getting a collective agreement to be looked at by the Friday. And so we, at that point in time, stopped our picketing, and on Friday the collective agreement was they were in negotiations, and we would have a collective agreement by the following Monday. When we returned to work, it was interesting because we had, I believe, we had the maternity leave provision given to us in our collective agreement, and I believe that we had I think our raise was 12%, if I'm not mistaken. Trudeau was the Prime Minister at that particular time. There was legislation introduced of rolling back wages, or in the public and private sector, to 6% and 5%. So what happened shortly after that is when the PM's negotiations started. Because of the legislation in place, they received 6% wage increase, and for the following year, 5% wage increase. And they had thought that they would just follow in our footsteps of getting the same collective agreement as we did, that they just needed to, that we had gone out on strike, we had done the sacrificing, we had done all the fighting for the wage increases and the benefits that came along with that.